Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
Wouldn't it be great to manage your portfolio on one platform? Well, now you can trade all in one place on Robinhood. That means you can trade individual stocks and ETFs and also buy and sell crypto using seriously powerful and intuitive tools at one of the lowest costs on average without needing to manage multiple apps. Robinhood makes withdrawing and depositing crypto seamless. Send crypto to your Robinhood account or send crypto from your Robinhood account to other wallets without deposit or withdrawal fees from Robinhood. Trade all in one place. Get started now on Robinhood. Trading crypto involves significant risk. Crypto trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Crypto held through Robinhood Crypto is not FDIC insured or SIPC protected. Network fees may apply to crypto transfers. Crypto transfers may not be available to all customers. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Securities trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer.
Real people making bold moves. Unforgettable journeys into life's next chapter. This is the Second Act Podcast.
Every day is a new chance. Mindset on a new path. Anything is possible. Any limit I surpass. Everything is in my grasp. I got tunnel vision with a pickaxe. Life is more fun when you live like there's no strings attached.
Here we are, John. We're back.
Dude,
It's been a minute since we've done one of these.
we had to do a little reset, right? Or maybe not a reset, just a reprioritization. Is that
Yep.
fair? Yeah, of everything going on.
Yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act. There's some really exciting things in the works for the second act. So if you're not following us on Instagram or LinkedIn or checking out our website with the handle Second Act Movement, you should do that because there's some really awesome things coming very soon. We're not going to give away any hints as to what's coming, but we're super pumped about what's coming.
I'll just say I met with Michael in person last week to hear about the progress, and I was giddy, like schoolgirl giddy all the way home, just thinking about it, and excited, just overwhelmed by what is coming down the pipe and what Second Act is doing, what Michael's doing, and man, it's exciting.
It is. Giddy is a right word. I mean, the people we're talking with get a little giddy about it because it's solving a real interesting pain point, and that gets me giddy from like a tech perspective on how to solve an interesting problem that exists and where we can take it and leveraging all the coolest sort of innovative technology tools that are out there to go about this. So
I mean, it's not NASA cool, but it's pretty
well, it's not quite in space level cool, but it's cool enough for me to be excited about it.
And with that, Michael,
gosh,
you should
Yes.
introduce our guest because I was reading her bio before and holy cow. I then jumped onto LinkedIn and I had to to look at her history. I had to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. I was like, all right, this is obnoxious. So
awesome.
Introduce her because it's going to take us the whole time to just go through her
sure.
bio.
Yeah. So we're here. Welcome back, everyone, to the second act. I'm excited to introduce Giovanna Camacho to our show today. Giovanna, otherwise known as G to her friends, is a trailblazing Army officer, Olympic trials competitor, and NASA engineer in training who spent her life pushing boundaries in service to others. From becoming the first female organic in an infantry unit to leading multinational medical operations, G has built a remarkable career at the intersection of military medicine, human performance, and advanced systems engineering. So I think of me as small-brained and think of G as big-brained because it's quite impressive. A West Point graduate with degrees in engineering, psychology, and behavioral neurobiology, she's now pursuing a PhD in systems engineering while prototyping groundbreaking wearable tech to support astronauts, divers, and the visually impaired. Currently serving as a Pathways intern at NASA Armstrong, Giovanna is on a mission to improve human capability, reduce preventable injury, and revolutionize the future of human-machine integration. Welcome to the show, G.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I don't even know where to start.
Did I get all that right? I think
You did.
Awesome. Is it a little strange to like hear it read back to you and like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, a little.
I know that when
Awesome.
you were reading that, Michael, I kind of just want to turn off my screen and let you guys talk. I mean, I have very little to to contribute to this conversation. I'm
Well,
impressed.
I know G has quite the story. I learned a little bit about it when we first got connected in a hangout, and I was just shocked in a good way about like some of the amazing pivots and things that she's had to work through to get to where she is. So I'm super excited to jump into it.
Let's
With
jump
that,
in.
let's do it.
G, tell me how this all started. Where are you from? And obviously, NASA was not on your mind when you were probably early ages, but tell me how you got there.
Wow, it has been a long journey. Actually came right out here, Riverside, California. That's where I started my journey. My dad was stationed at March Air Force Base out here. And then unfortunately, they thought there was going to be a shutdown. So then we decided to migrate up to Travis Air Force Base. So I started out in California. And from there, I can't say that I ever thought I'd be working at NASA. I went to school out at Dixon High School. It was a very country town.
Okay.
So very stuck in their ways. Like even getting like a Walmart was a big deal. So they were worried it was going to shut down some of the bigger businesses. So a lot of those technological advances weren't really proclaimed or thought about in that town. So leaving that town was a big step for me, even getting accepted into West Point. So I can tell you a little bit about that journey. I'm not sure how far you want me to get into the weeds here. So
Yeah. I mean, I would love to hear about getting into West Point. You know, we've had a couple service academy
Uh-huh.
guests on our show, and you know, every story is so unique and so impactful to the individual getting into, whether it's the Naval Academy or West Point. Or so I'd love to hear that whole process for you, and you know, just the mindset applying, um, you know, what your friends thought, what your family thought, you know, and then up to getting accepted.
absolutely. So at that time when I applied, I wasn't living with my family. I had actually a little bit of a rocky road. I was taken from my family at the age of 12 for through Child Protective Services. I was kind of bouncing around different homes, living with friends, and from there, I had worked a lot of jobs. And so when I was at the job fair, there was a cadet that showed up with a kind of like a busboy hat at the time. Since then, they've changed to more of like this hot dial style hat. But when you first walk up, you know, you see somebody wearing like their dress gray with the neck thing. You're like, what is he doing here? So he seemed a little out of place. So I walked over and I wanted to know what was going on. His name is Brian Towser. And I'm still very good friends with him today. And he just explained to me, like, there's this really awesome place. And, you know, you get to serve your country while also getting paid to go to school. And you get to do sports. And, like, he just made it sound like Neverland. So I was like, I need to go there. So had applied to a lot of different colleges and saved up a lot of money because those applications are expensive. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have anybody to guide me. So I spent way too much money on applying to all these places because I didn't know any better. Like I probably should have done a better cost analysis up front and figured out which of these do you really want to go to. But I blew through like $500 on applications. I got accepted to a lot of places. And when I was first doing the West Point application, my career counselor was totally against it. She was like, coming from Dixon High, a 4.2 doesn't mean a whole lot. I think that you should really look towards going to, you know, community college, something you can afford." And I was like, "But it's free. I don't understand," you know? So I had to get in on her at lunchtime and I was like, "Just sign the paperwork." So she signed the paperwork and I kind of explained to Michael previously it was a little bit gratifying when I did get in because then, you know, they came in, they did this wild presentation in front of your school. So you're like below your breath, you're like, "Oh, ha, ha, I made it." Uh, so that was kind of funny. But realistically, yeah, I didn't really think I was going to get in. I went through Ellen Tauscher and Barbara Boxer, which also is knowledge I did not know. Since my father had served, I could have gone under a presidential nomination, but I didn't know that. So I did the long-term route of going through Barbara and Ellen, and they all have different processes of doing that. So I got yeses on both ends, so it was a double yes, so that was good for me. California is a very competitive state, a lot of people, so I also didn't think I really realized the gravity of the yes at the time. I was just like, "They said yes, let's go." So I think getting in was a huge milestone for me and just a change of scenery in general, coming from Dixon, going all the way across the country, nice, beautiful fall leaves. But also, I had explained to Michael, it's a little bit of a culture shock and moving in because you're kind of progressing from like absolute freedom since I was kind of, bouncing off friends' couches. I didn't have a curfew. And then now it's like rules, regulations, restrictions. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I think that was definitely hard for me. And then also getting into the academy and realizing that they weren't as progressive as I thought they were with women. And there was a lot of roadblocks there that I dealt with.
And what year was that, or what range of time was that, G?
Oh, I graduated in 2008 and then I directly went into the academy that summer. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I think, John, I got a little preview of some of G's story, but you'll notice there's a consistent theme of grit and resilience throughout everything up to this point. I'm super excited for more of her story to come out. So, what happened when you got into the academy, G, and you had to make those adjustments from sort of the rebellious run through wall kid to now trying to deal within the construct of a very formal hierarchy and rules and things like that?
I actually think it taught me one of the best things in life, right? Because you get tired, you keep slamming against the concrete wall. So you figure out which battles to fight so that way you can win the overall war, right? So I think that was huge for me and realizing, like, okay, like I can't get away with this. It's not really worth it. Just go to bed on time, do what you're supposed to do. Because I originally, yeah, there was a lot of angst there. Somebody would tell me to do something and then they'd be like, "I'll just give you push-ups." So after a while, you're like, "I don't care about push-ups. I'll do all the push-ups you want." So kind of moving past that and realizing that you needed to be part of the overall group and do what was going to be best for that group. It made you something bigger than yourself, which I think is a big lesson to learn. And then also really realizing that certain things you're like, that's not that big of a deal. It's fine. But then other things, that's when you put your foot down and that's when people are going to listen to what you have to say when you think about it in the best way to give that message, right? Because I think at the time, like the biggest change for me that I'm very proud of that I made at West Point was creating the West Point women's boxing team. Starting out, they used to kick us out of the gym. We had to go train at Camp Buckner late at night. We called ourselves the Underground, like we were like this hush secret boxing society. That was kind of silly to us, but there were previous women that had tried to push the boundaries there, but there's a way to speak and a way to get your point across. You can't compare apples to oranges, right? So instead, you kind of have to go around, this is what we want, this is our drive, this is our goal. And when you start winning and doing what you need to do, and you really put your head down and grind, people will start seeing like you're not here to play around. This is what you want to do. So I think really getting those messages to the right people and in the right way and not being so combative, but learning how to see things from different people's perspectives to try to make that compromise and meet them halfway was really important for that.
Wow.
That's awesome.
G, I want to niche down for, for some of our listeners. Talk about the size of the academy, and then talk about how many women are at the academy. Now talk about how many female, potential boxers there are. You're an incredibly small group who's making changes. Obviously there's adversity. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So at that time, there was for every 11 male, there was one female. So I could go an entire day and not see any females. However, I will say when we had our first tryouts, that was kind of one of the things they were saying. There's not that many women excited about this. And we had 130 women come out to
Wow.
tryouts. And so to have that kind of a show up was a little rough, right? Because we had to also argue for ratio. Because originally they were like, we're only going to give you about 5 to 6, what they call auto slots, which allows them to train during training time instead of having to do other military things that are required during that time period, such as like getting ready for marching or if they had them doing work in the barracks. And so, in order to argue the auto slots, you kind of have to get a little smart. You're like, well, there's actually 12 weight classes here. And if we did the ratios comparable to male, we should at least have at the minimum 12, and then plus or minus 2 in case somebody gets injured. So once you start getting a little bit smarter, making the arguments, you're able to get a little wiggle room. But either way, like getting to from 130 women, how we were able to narrow it down they had to be good military, academic wise, and physical wise, right? But I was open to accepting somebody who had no boxing experience as long as they had the grit. And so the first couple days were just absolute terror of just cardio, just people like walking out, right? Because it was like, how hard till we break these people so that they leave? Because come whittling down 130 to a team of 12 plus or minus two was very scary. However, we ended up doing like a lot of pendulum runs, a lot of cardio, heavy cardio, and then by the time it came to getting punched in the face, a lot of people were walking out the door, which was really what we wanted. We wanted the women that had the grit, the tenacity, and that would represent our team well. So I think that was definitely what helped carry on the legacy. So that way, when I leave, we knew that we had some strong women left behind that weren't going to be challenged on the academic, military, or physical front and could actually represent as boxers. Because you could give me somebody who knows absolutely nothing about boxing, but if they have that grit, they're gonna survive because you can teach somebody the talent, but you can't teach somebody the heart.
And how many of those initial selection did not box before?
I wanna say all of them but one. Yeah, so
Wow.
Oh,
that was,
wow.
very impressive with the girls because they went from some of them were kind of doing the Irish fight, which was a little scary when they first walked in. We're like, "Oh boy, let's get this looking a lot better." So that was good.
Nice. And for the person who doesn't know here, what in the world is a pendulum run? What is that?
Oh, okay. So we had by the docks, we have this road that just two inclines and just right down the
Okay.
centers, there's like a small U. So just having them go up and down that, after a couple rounds of that, people were like, I'm done. So they were just given up by the docks. Then we had what's called a indoor obstacle course. So the IOCT had them run that a couple times. They have the
Okay.
stairways to heaven that we have in Arvin. So that's like 3 flights of stairs. So just really trying to break people down to the point where they're just like, I can't do this anymore.
All
Yeah.
right. So you got to your core group and then you're in the academy. Where do things go from there?
Yeah, so we got to the core group, which was great. The problem therein was finding the coach, right? So we went through quite a few coaches. I actually had some negative incident with a coach. He was lieutenant colonel at the time, and he was a little very aggressive, like kind of on a harassment side. Tried to put forth, messaging, text messages, tried to tell higher up chain of command. Everybody kind of just gives you the cold shoulder until things got a little bit worse. I was attacked in my cadet barracks room. And from there, they were able to move that person. And then, that was when the heat really came on to try to find a good coach. And so I was desperate at that point. Went to do my first fight out in Gleason's, and we were able to find our coach, Jackie Atkins. And I just essentially begged her with tears in my eyes. And I was very grateful that she said that she would come down. However, she was only able to come down once a week, if that. So that turned to me becoming the actual end all say all coach. And then she would be there for sparring scenarios, which was helpful. And to get her to come down, sometimes I would just have to do a little side hustle. So we would fundraise by working the concessions for the football games. And then we would also sell some t shirts. And I was able to network with somebody in town who was really supportive of the boxing team. So they made us the t shirts at a lower cost. And by selling those, we were able to help support her, if she was traveling up from New Jersey. So, if she wanted to spend the night, we could get her, a nice little hotel so she would spend the night and then work with the girls. And we were also able to get her up at Camp Buckner for about a week. So we did a training camp with her, which was really awesome.
And G, you're talking like, if I understand you correctly, you're spearheading this whole thing. I mean, you're finding the coach, you're going to her, tears in your eyes, pleading her for her to come teach you and coach you. I mean, you're running the show.
Yeah, and I had a lot of background help. The problem was with the higher officers, there was a lot of people that at the time were not willing to put their neck out, in such an environment where you might step on the wrong toes. So lucky for me, I was able to coordinate with our career development officer, and she was able to network me into a lawyer at the time, which was super helpful, as well as an officer in charge. So Jackie Escobar was her name, and She was hard officer. So I was like, man, if this woman is on our side, we will be unstoppable. And we absolutely were. So she was able to, Colonel Ryan was the lawyer at the time, and Jackie Escobar, just full throttle, head on, just really helping us out, move forward as a team, which I thought was incredible. And without their leadership, I don't think that our voices would have been heard. So since then, Jackie Escobar, we lost her to an illness, unfortunately. However, I did speak. Her husband had called me years after to speak at her funeral, which was kind of crazy in retrospect to think, like, even after all those years, how close we were. But it was such an honor to be able to speak on her behalf when she couldn't speak any longer because she was a voice for us cadets for so long.
Gee, is your grit and tenacity and really this survival instinct that you have, like, I'm going to figure out how to survive in the scenarios up to this point, and then probably later on in your life, is that stem from your childhood experience, or does it stem from somebody in your life who you sort of witnessed and admired? Like, or a combination of things that has sort of instilled that I will not quit in under any circumstances until I reach my goal? Like, help me understand the mindset there.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just how do I get to yes, right? So since a child and being told no all the time and being put down quite a bit and going through what I did when I was younger, I just started to realize I can't count on others. I got to count on me, which I've started to learn that you do also need others, right? To move forward, but you can't play victim. So I know a lot of people like to play victim and they're like, I can't do this because somebody said this, right? But I think a lot of times when you sit down and really think through, there's always a workaround. There's a way to get to the yes if it's what's really supposed to happen. And so I think in everything that I do, I want to be told no, and I want to be told no and why, right? So if it's a no and a why that is realistic, then I can stomach that. But if the why doesn't match my values, and I know that there's actually supposed to be a yes at the end of this, I'm gonna keep slamming my head against the concrete to make
That's
things
good.
work, right? So I think that a lot of people could really focus on, getting to the yes. It's so easy to say no and walk away and just think that that's it, that they told me no, right? But how many times have we heard of people, like really famous people too, that have been told no, 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 and they've always gotten to the yes because they did the workaround. They were like, I believe in me. I believe that I can see this through. And I think that if people came at life with that mentality, they would get to a lot more yeses. So
I love that.
So, gee, let's fast forward. Your time at the academy, probably incredibly eye opening, developing more of that grit. Obviously, your boxing career, is shaping up. Tell me about as you look towards graduation and you're looking at the big army, going into big army, um, and your future kind of unfolding before you. What's going through your mind? What are you shaping yourself up for? And how are you getting ready?
right. So at the academy, you want to be the best versions of you. You want to try to really push past your boundaries. So one of my greatest fears used to be the water. And it was because somebody tried to drown me in the water. So I really could not get past that. I had to, the academy is a place that I think is amazing in the fact that it pokes you in all those places, right? It brings out your strengths, but it brings out your weaknesses. So I was definitely struggling with swimming. I was able to move past those fears and I started to see myself become a better me. And I think that really gave you a little bit more confidence leaning forward, going to your new unit. But then I also realized that, if I'm having this much struggle here, with opposite sex trying to move forward, is that the way it's going to be out there? But people kept talking about this magical army place, like they always say, which I'm sure a lot of people in the military have heard when I get to my real unit, this isn't the real army. We heard a lot of that. This isn't the real army. Things will get better. So you're like, okay. So trying to get through to the real army, I was like, I got to be ready. I got to be prepared. And I think that was really my focus there on just trying to be a better me and also learn how to speak up for myself a little bit better because I did have multiple run-ins, people trying to pull me out of bed or like really inappropriate things that were still occurring during that time period. So I was trying to figure out, how is this all going to work out? But then when I graduated and I went to my new unit, I also met kind of the same angst, but I felt like that boxing team and the preparation of dealing with people telling me no of higher rank really helped get me ready for what I was supposed to be ready for. We were one of the first women to go into infantry units. I graduated in 2013. And when I first entered my first unit, that wasn't the greeting I expected. They were very old school. You had to dress, your full dress, and you did all the facing movements. You did the knock in. Was totally ready to go. West Point prepared me. But then when I got there, my commander just laughed in my face, and I was not ready for that, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." And he called in first sergeant. He was like, "This is a fucking joke. We don't have female infantry, One made a mistake. They thought you were Giovanni Camacho. We were expecting a big Samoan football player. Like, who are you?" So we roll out to first formation with my platoon, and he looks at all 60 of my medics, and he's like, "Don't worry, like, no sexual assault, no harassment. She'll be out of here in 2 weeks." And I'm just like, what is happening? And so he like walks away, and sure enough, first thing, a soldier tries to hit on me, and it's just like, this is a no-go. So something in me like kind of snapped. I excused everybody, and I was like, everybody can leave except for you. And then for 2 hours, I proceeded to just, do PT with this guy till I broke him down. He started crying. He said he just wanted to go home. And I was like, don't mess with me in front of the Voodoo family, and he's just like, Roger that, ma'am, and just like skeet skirted out. But it was like, that's how you had to like really get into these people's brains almost for the respect. And originally, when I got to that unit, no one was saluting me. I did not care. But then when I noticed that my soldiers, my NCOs started hemming people up and started protecting me, I realized it's like they've welcomed me into the family, like the brotherhood. So there was even a moment where we were supposed to have shared barracks, and they're like, no women are allowed in the barracks, so she has to camp outside. I was totally fine with camping outside, and my soldiers had a riot. They're like, we will not sleep without our PL. So like it was kind of cool to see the guys start to stick up for me at my
Nice.
level. I did have hard time with leadership. They pulled my platoon away from me for training, which was very hurtful. I loved doing physical PT. I loved carving out those workouts because I felt like I was with my boxing team again, just being able to carve out workouts that I know are going to work. They're going to help facilitate people passing that APFT. You're going to see them go through that where they couldn't do something and they can do something. And it's like the ultimate fulfillment to be able to program that and work through your soldier with something so small that seems to everybody else, but for them, that's so big. It's a very big confidence booster, team builder event. And I was told, they need to spend time with their infantry platoon. And so I made the argument that just like an infantryman is trained and honed by that infantry officer, the same for medical on their medical tasks. They need to be experts at this. And so I argued for sergeant's time training. So I was able to get my guys back, which was a big deal for that one day a week, a Thursday. So the guys were at least happy with that. It was hurtful going through some of the things with the platoon because they're like, we know they're just doing this because you're a woman, which was really frustrating to hear. And I had a first sergeant who stuck up for me, kind of behind the scenes. He didn't do it in front of the guys, but he would tell me, you're going to get a negative review on this inspection. So I don't know why you're trying. So, but I was like, no, it's like, so it was hard to go through that with my guys. They would work really hard, they'd lay everything out, and we would still not pass, right? So to know that they had my back, even knowing we still weren't going to pass, and even to have them continue to do the right things was a very big deal. And I think that's really what helped guide me, even with higher leadership being not the nicest. And I was finally able to get in with brigade commander. The first sergeant got me an audience with him. And he said, the only way to get out of this unit is for you to, if you want to go join All Army and box your way out, then you're going to have to pass the best ranger competition. So I was like, what do I need to do? Sign me up. So I signed up for this best ranger competition. I was on the Army underweight program, and they're asking me to rock with over 200 pounds of gear. I'm a whopping 103
What?
pounds wet, which was very exhausting to carry all of that. But
Yeah, gee, just for our audience, you mentioned the initial perception was this huge Samoan person was coming in, and just describe for our audience exactly like as much detail as you want. But a petite or more petite woman.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
So it's
I'm
like
100% Puerto Rican, just this teeny tiny 5'1.5". Have to get the extra half in there. And I was a whopping 103 pounds soaking wet. So, yes, running around with 200 pounds is a lot.
that's
It's a
wild.
lot on your neck, it's a lot on your knees, a lot on your feet. I still have a lot of injuries from that time in service, but I think the mental and, showing up for my guys was the biggest thing. So, through all the pain, just pushing through it, all the blood, all the scars, because those rucks are not meant for us. I had to cinch it down really hard, and they kinda cut into the skin. So I definitely still have scars on my side from all the ruck runs and trying to make it in first all the time for our platoon.
Oh my gosh.
But I think over time, like I said, I know that my platoon still loves me. We still all chat. Most of them are out now, but we definitely still like cheer each other on through social media and chit chat here and there. But I think getting through that Ranger competition was a big deal for me. It was a local one we had at Fort Lewis. And that's when they allowed me to go to All Army Boxing, and at that time, they had already replaced me with a male medical officer. They brought the whole platoon back for PT time, like, everything went back to normal for them. So, I know that I did the best I could with that unit, but maybe that's what that unit needed at that time was that male leadership to be able to fall back into that normal brotherhood. I didn't wanna disrupt that. I just wanted to do my job.
Yep.
But getting out of there and being able to move forward and serve as a world-class athlete in the boxing world was also very useful for the Army, I think, at that time, since they had also put in measures that the male Army team couldn't box, because they got rid of the headgear. So they weren't allowing soldiers to box without headgear. But at the Olympic level, they were forcing them to take off the headgear, and they still had women wearing headgear. So then the whole men's team became a whole women's team at that level. The coaches were upset, but they were forced to work with us because that's all they had. And I think that it was kind of funny seeing that transition because then it was like we became an entire women's team that was representing the Army with only 2 males on the team. And it was very interesting to see the ratios kind of flip a little bit. But I think that we did very good because we would go into schools and do, like, total Army recruitment missions, teaching them about goal setting, getting them excited about boxing, in addition to doing our boxing competitions that would bring, to the surface a lot of that integration that you see between civilians. That might be the first interaction they ever have with a military soldier. And so being able to see the warrior spirit and just how promoted we are on that stage and how we can bring something to the table, I think was really good to have that interface.
So, you're about to make a trade based on a friend's text. But which you do you listen to? Is it, "Oh, we could buy a house in Tulum"? Get optioning those options. We could lose everything. Or, let's do a little research. Get your head in the trade and make the investment decision that's right for you. Learn more at finra.org/trade-smart.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
And was this around sort of the end of your tenure in the Army that this was happening?
No, so after my time at the Army boxing program, I actually went back and became an XO at another battalion. I also served as their company commander. And then I moved over and did some time over in the medical field. And I served over in Poland and doing a lot of field training exercises out in Russia and Korea as well. So that was kind of cool to get to see all the different sides of the military and what that entailed. However, I still felt like I wasn't meeting my full purpose as a human being, because during this time still, women were being told we couldn't do things. So as I got more into diving, I wasn't able to do combat diver school. They're promoting ranger school all the way, but there was other things that women still weren't being allowed to do and it was kind of getting exhausting being told no. And I realized that the Army just wasn't going to move at the pace that I was trying to move. And I needed to break free from that. I felt like I was very restrained. And I think since then I've done due diligence to move past any restraints, and now that's kind of what you've seen is the overall progression of me being like, I want to get smarter, I want to get more experience, I want to go do all these internships. And the transition out of military life is extremely hard. I know when I was leaving, signing the paperwork, a lot of people were like, "Good luck." Oh man, like you're kind of told like, "Best of luck." Like you don't know what's gonna happen, and I don't think it really dawned on you till you get your DSU 14. People are signing you, saying all these things like, "Good luck," and you're like, "What's gonna happen to me? Am I gonna turn into a pumpkin?" Like you just don't know. And I think you have a plan A, B, and C that you think's gonna work. Like I had a scholarship to medical school. I thought that was me. I thought that was going to be the end all say all. And if things don't work out, I'll just run back to the military. But you start to realize like you have all these injuries. They don't want you back, like so you're like, "Oh boy." Now, and then that came out with COVID would hit, and that kind of killed the Hollywood scene out here and you're like, "Oh gosh, what does this mean for me? Where do I fit in this picture?" You start to realize since I joined the military when I was 17, I got out when I was 29. That's a long time of somebody telling you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And then you're like, now I'm in control and you've changed as a person. So I joined wanting to be medical. And then I realized I had more of this creative background, this want to build, this innovative side that wasn't getting the same inspiration in medical. So then you're starting to realize, wow, like I think the military, maybe this whole time I was meant to be an engineer. West Point was an engineering school. Why did I never realize this until now? So it's kind of like you're peeling off all of these layers that you covered up over time, so you're really trying to figure out who is you, what's your brand, what do you stand for, what are your values? You're by yourself now. You don't have that Army family like you do in a sense where you can call them up for old buddies. You have people reach out to you still years after the fact. What's that document or what's that reg, and you definitely are sure to help out and pay it forward, but you're still essentially very much alone and trying to navigate. I know they say that there's a lot of companies out there who are all for military, but at the end of the day, you're kind of hit with that. Well, you have a lot of soft skills. What are your technical skills? So you start to learn very quickly a lot of what you learn in the military might not translate to the civilian sector. So you need to get
Yeah.
out there and you need to like be hungry. You're like, it's definitely pushing the reset button on your career. You have a lot of good experiences and a lot of good things and knowledge base to grow on top of, I think. And that's what's definitely helped me. And you start to realize, that weird thing they taught me then, that kinda helps me now, like, I had to give all these boring presentations, but now I can give presentations no problem. I can do it last minute. "Oh, you want me to spit something out in 5 minutes? Here you go." Like, so all the last minute things that you got used to doing in the military, in the civilian world, all of a sudden, you're a hot commodity because you could do it quick, you could do it fast, you know how to communicate and speak with people about different things. You've lived in so many places that whenever you meet somebody, they're like, "Oh, I lived here." You're like, "Oh, yeah, I was there too." So you can always have like, kind of that in with somebody on their experiences or what they've seen and what you've seen. And I think trying to network and mesh that all together has really helped out. But I don't think that a lot of people get that helping hand when they exit the military. So it is very scary when you first leave.
And you mentioned having that hunger, and if anybody goes to your LinkedIn profile, they will see how hungry you were to like experiment and try all these different things. What are some of the fun ones that, as you're trying to figure out life post military, that you want to share with our audience that has
Oh,
led you
absolutely.
to NASA?
So I've worked on sono buoys, I've worked on submarines, I've worked on tanks, and I've got to work with NOC TSD on the submarines. I worked on tanks for the Army Research Laboratory as well as Pratt and Miller. The sono buoys with Spartan Industries. I've just decided to say yes to every and any internship. So I know a lot of people are like, "You look like you don't know what you want," and you're like, "No, no, no. I look like I'm trying to find what I want." Like, because I've been asked
Nice.
that in many interviews, and that's kind of the challenging thing. Even when I was coming to the University of Virginia, they asked me, "How are you sure that systems engineering is really for you?" And you're like, what system haven't I worked on, and just being able to touch the tanks and know about weapon systems and know about the defensive strategies and the different domains that we're using and how you can insert yourself here, has been really useful on trying to integrate myself. And I think having that practice of working with civilians, because a lot of people, for me, the Army was my mommy and daddy, 17 through 29. It was very different to be integrated, and you have to communicate differently. We're very direct, military people are. I noticed that with civilians, you got to be a little bit more, a little bit more
Yes.
coddle. You have to be more emotional. You have to understand that there's more data points to emotions than you previously thought there were. You have to learn the tempo, right? So we're very fast tempo. You might be faster thinking than others. You got to wait for them to catch up. The interpersonal relationships are way different. So in the
Yeah.
military, I knew every single one of my soldiers, their birth dates of their kids, what major events in their lives there were. Here in the civilian sector, there's companies where you might have a little bit of that interpersonal, but sometimes it's very transactional. It's very much touch
Hmm.
and go and move on. And for me, that's been very weird. Even having this different mode of talking to people online, giving presentations versus like in person, getting to see everybody's faces. So I think going through each of those iterations, working in different groups, you're kind of able to be like, this works, that does not work, And I think that's been very useful on making yourself understand what works, what doesn't work, and then kind of seeing all the different things that the world kind of has to offer before you kind of settle in and are like, okay, this is what I want to do.
And your experience, at least in the conversation we had offline, it was pretty varied. I think you had mentioned that you had spent some time down in the islands. You had done some stuff in Hollywood production. Like,
Yeah.
share some of that. It's awesome that all of these seemingly random events led you to NASA. At the end of the day, where you are now. So I'd love if you could share a little bit more.
Yeah, so when I was out at Barbados, it was very interesting. It was totally my kind of vibe, beach bum, love it. And I surfed in the morning and then I went in and I taught some diving classes and then from there I went and taught some boxing classes. But what was really cool about Barbados is like, there's like trades that you can do. So I would trade boxing classes for surfing classes, or if there was something specifically somebody wanted to learn about, the ocean, you can try to bring them out in the ocean and show them, what's going on there. And then they would hook you up with some fish sandwiches or something. So that was really cool. It's a
I
different
love it.
lifestyle. And being able to integrate within another culture is also something new. And at least they all spoke English. But I do remember when my dad came to visit, he was like, I don't understand what they're saying. So it was kind of interesting to know that I was able to pick up on the language and really understand
Nice.
and get bred into that family. And I know that if I ever go back there, you can always go back and they're always like, we can invite you over and you can come dive and you can teach dive master classes and it'll be great. And, so always trying the military definitely taught me like when you go to a new spot, don't be afraid to get out there. You're able to integrate and you're like a
Nice.
chameleon almost. You're like, how can I find what I like in this environment? There's going to be stuff you like and stuff you don't like, right? And so being able to acclimate to that was definitely helpful on the islands. And then when I realized my time on the islands was up was when, people talk about island fever and you can cross Barbados in a single day. I think it takes like
Okay.
3 hours to get from one side of the island to another. You've done all the things, you've seen all the people, you're known as the boxing woman on island, and yes, you've formed a family there, but like immigration time's coming up. What are you gonna do next, right? And they're like, either you marry a Bayesian or you get out. And you're like, wow, that's not happening. So I like was surfing the internet. I'm like, what am I gonna do next? What am I passionate about? So, like a lot of people are like, movies, why not? So I was really into comics growing up, Batman. That's when I shot out to do my time at Veterans Media Entertainment over in Hollywood. And I
Okay.
had a good stint out there being a production assistant. So it's very similar to EXO. It's like you put out fires, they give you walkie-talkies, you're trying to help with logistics. You set up a movie scene, then you jump, you take it down. And, in the military, we call it jumping. It's the same thing. So, like, they realized a lot of military people actually work on set, which is really funny. So I kind of found, like my tribe there. So I felt
Okay.
like I was in my happy place in the grind. But I knew like long term, that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I knew I wanted to, because I kept getting told, but what about technical skills during all the internships that I had done? So I was like, all right, let's go get technical. So that's when I knew Beach Bum. I looked up what's the best human factor school, went to Embry Riddle over at by Daytona. And that's when I knew, like, all right, I'm locked in. This is what I'm doing, getting a master's degree. Another thing I didn't know at the time was that you don't actually have to get a master's degree before going into a doctorate program. So I
Oh,
did not know that. A lot of people think that you have to get a master's and a doctorate. You can actually apply straight from undergrad to the doctorate program. Did not know that. So I did 2 years of a master's degree. And then again, I was told, you're not going to make it into the doctorate program. And again, it was like, why? It's like, this is what I want to do. And they just told me, we want diversity. So you're not going to get accepted here at Embry. You need to like look beyond, right? And not only do you need to look beyond, you need to actually, I'll never forget it. The woman that told me, her Elizabeth Blickenserver. So she was rather harsh with me, telling me, you're never going to get in. You need a journal article. You need this, you need that, you need that. But I'm kind of glad she did, because then that stimulated the inner, what do you mean no? Of course, I went and found a group. We wrote up an article. I'm like, boom, publication done. So then I was like running
nice.
around applying to schools and figuring out. She was like, and I'm not writing you a recommendation letter until you've met with the advisor. He says he's willing to accept you and you actually know you have an in that program. So I went around again. I wrote all these letters and she was upset because I didn't apply to a school that she wanted me to apply to. And I was like, but I don't want to go to that school. And she's like, well, then I'm not writing you the recommendation letter for UVA. And I was like, what do you mean? UVA is my top school. The instructor said he would take me there. And she was just like, no, it's not happening. So I literally remember going back to my office. I was working at the Veterans Coordination Center. And I was just so sad. And my boss was like, what is wrong with you? He was like, I'm sure you could run down that hallway, because it was right before Thanksgiving break. He's like, you could run right down that hallway and ask anyone for a recommendation letter, and they would write it, any instructor. And he's like, wait, you're right. And so I went running down the hall. Sure enough, I found Albert Bouquet. He wrote me a letter. He was my statistics teacher. And I was like, I'm so sorry. This is last minute. But I was told that they won't write this letter. I need you to write the letter. And he's like, I'll write it. I'll write it in the next 30 minutes. So he wrote the letter, sent it in. And it was just, I just couldn't be more thankful for that. And even just having those people along the way to just be like, what are you doing? Suck it up. Go ask somebody else. What do you mean she said no? Like, so I think it was super helpful to have those people that are going to keep pushing you to keep going a little bit further. So that's kind of what I meant with, you can do quite a bit by yourself, but even sometimes it's helpful to have that person poke at you and be like, get up, get up. Like, so I think that was great. And being able to come to UVA has been great. And having all the networking connections that I have at UVA, they're very well funded, very well read into Congress. And I even at UVA being told no with what I wanted to work on for my dissertation. And then having like, for my volunteer work and experience, I found that I volunteered for all these people. I didn't think anything of it at the time. So when I was down in Florida, when I volunteered for Women Divers Hall of Fame, I volunteered with Force Blue, and somebody reached out to me and they were just like, yeah, so you should apply. And I was like, women can't apply to this. They're like, what do you mean? Why not? And I'm like, it literally says we have to have combat experience in the front lines, for this amount of time period. And like women were never allowed to be in combat during that time period. So like the amount of women that you're asking to do that is like zero. And they're like, oh, we got to fix that. So I think a lot of times it's like people just don't know sometimes
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
put out these requirements. And so after fixing that, we were able to have a lot more women hop on board with Force Blue, go out, do some good volunteer service. But in that was when I met another woman who was like, you got to apply for this scholarship. And I was like, okay, sure. And then I had another person tell me, like, I don't think that you're ready to apply for that just yet. You have to get to this other level. So I was like, okay. And unfortunately, I don't even know why at that time I listened to that person. A year later, that person comes back and they're like, apply for the scholarship. What are you doing? So then go apply for this scholarship, got the scholarship. That was my original seed funding for the prototype I'm currently working on now. And it was actually a Laurel Clark. If you're aware of the Columbia disaster, most people are, you might not know her exact name. However, she was one of the astronauts that unfortunately lost her life in that mission. And she is survived by her husband and her son. And her husband donated the money, the seed
Oh,
money
wow.
for this initial prototype build. And so after getting his support, multiple people follow in line. They're like, "Oh, you have his support? Then sure, you'll have our support as well." So it really just becomes networking and meeting with people, being at the right place at the right time. And if somebody tells you no, just try. At least try. So at least throw the shot. So
So, gee, for the average listener who's not an engineer and not sort of big brained like you, can you just explain very simply like the really cool thing that you're working on at NASA so people can sort of connect all the dots going back from your youth up to this point and how you're trying to basically revolutionize the world with some cool stuff at the most prestigious space organization in the world?
yeah, so I'm actually working on a couple projects here. I started out working on X66. That project's kind of been timed out, but they were building a simulator. So, systems engineer, you create a model base of what that looks like, and it'll entail what everybody's working on. So, from mechanical to electrical, anything that's thermodynamics, will compile everybody's information into an overall model. Because when people put down requirements, you can be like, I want something to fly, or like a bird flies, like a bee flies, and people have like different thoughts of what flies, right? And so being able to have a person that can bring a group of people together, just like I did in the military with platoon leader, right? So you had medics running around doing different jobs, different entities. It's no different with engineering. People running around doing different jobs. They want to tell you, they want to teach you all the details about their job. They're the subject matter experts. So you'll go to them, you learn as much as you can, you help cross teach, cross talk, because some people speak, like you said, very scientifically. And it's really hard for somebody else on the electrical side might not understand what's happening on the mechanical side. So getting everybody to talk and speak one language is very imperative as you move forward to that mission set. And so that's what I do as here at NASA. So since X66, I've been put on another project, which was an inert gas chamber build. So that is a huge chamber, and it helps figure out, what goes up in the air. Is it going to be structurally sound? Is it gonna be able to survive, the heat that's placed, the chemicals within that environment, and that battle space, right? And so in order to do that testing, you have to have this entire system. It has hardware, it has software. You have to figure out how we're gonna integrate that, how we're gonna automate certain parts of that are gonna be able to complete that overall test, right? And then now I'm actually working over in the ops department on F-15s. And so a lot of times that's about putting different things onto the overall system and seeing how that will test out on different airplanes. And when we figure out certain things that work on airplanes, then we can integrate that up to higher elevations and eventually out to space. And I'm also able to build things online. So you'll build things like on a program called Creo. It's like Lego blocks. You kind of put different parts together, see what works. You talk to the mechanics. You're like, hey, can you actually build something that looks like this? You're kind of the architect design. You can see that all the way through development phase, do some tests on it, and integrate that onto a system that can fly out either into air or into space. So it's pretty cool to be on a lot of these different projects. And as a systems engineer here at NASA at Armstrong, you're able to see something from like infancy baby idea phase all the way out through the full build and flight. So I think that's very cool to be a part of the whole life cycle, to include the sustainment
Absolutely.
side as well.
Jeez.
That's awesome. And here we are to today. Now we're
Looking
having a
okay.
conversation.
Yeah, and then, outside of that, I'm also working on my prototype build, which is my dissertation. It
Yep.
was inspired by Dr. Angus Rupert. He worked on a prototype that has to deal with tactile feel and sensation. So in his project, he worked with being able to put people up in flight. So pilots will put this tactors on, and it gives you different feels and sensations because what you're seeing is a lot different from what your body is feeling within your inner ear canals.
Yeah.
So it throws off. So you have what happened, unfortunately, when people die and have like the cemetery, they call it like the cemetery circle attack or something of like when they're flying, right? And they kind of get what they see is different from what they're hearing. And what happens is there's a lot of pilots that go down because of that. So he was trying to integrate a tactile sensation that would help you know what's the actual orientation of that airplane. And we wouldn't have had, the loss of Kobe Bryant had his pilot not experienced this. And he's been able to test it where pilots have he has completely blindfolded himself and flown an airplane with just the use of tactile sensations, which is
Wow.
pretty phenomenal. And so when I reached out to him, I was like, have you tried this in the water? He was like, we tried this in the 90s. The instrumentation wasn't there yet. And then the war kicked off. So we lost a lot of funding. And so I was able to go and test that out in Ireland with the visually disabled. and create another tactile experiment now with prototype able to test divers in the water as well.
That's
And
cool.
so my hope is to create my own version. There's gonna be like 3 upcoming versions that I'm working here in the FOSS lab to create with Alan Parker. And I think that it's gonna be awesome. So we'll see how that goes for my final dissertation. Yep.
And this is a wearable item that could go out to the marketplace. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow, that is
That is
impressive.
super cool. Yeah.
I mean, from a prior pilot, vertigo is one of those big things where we always talk about trusting your instruments, trusting what you see in front of you. But when your body is telling you something completely different than what your eyes are telling you, it's hard to trust the two little nodes in your body that are gathering so much information when everything else around you is telling you something different. So I can imagine that's similar to, diving blacked out or diving at night or cave diving, things like that. So what a huge accomplishment or huge, piece of technology. That's amazing.
Yeah, the spatial disorientation is definitely different down in the water, which is very similar to space, which is how you're able to make that space connection because there's 6 degrees of freedom. So if you imagine how crazy it was for a pilot when you're in space or when you're underwater, where there is no like real gravity, you're just kind of going in a different direction. It would be very useful for people to have this, as well as the visually disabled, who is a underserviced population that need to have additional orientation cues to help them and give them a sense of independence.
Well, when, not if, but when you are done with this and it's in production and out there in the world, we'll definitely have to have you come back on the show, G, to talk about
Absolutely.
it and help promote it and talk about all the amazing things that it's doing to help people. But until then, we like to wrap up our shows with the
Yeah.
parting advice that we ask you to give to our audience, practical advice or insights based on your journey and your accomplishments and all the amazing things that you've done, and share that with them so that they can, if they're contemplating their second act or just getting started, they can start to have the courage and confidence to do that.
Yeah.
Wow, party advice. So I know whenever we go in the ring, the corner, you don't want to like inundate people with a lot of information. So I think my top 3 things would be don't be a victim, right? Try to get to the yes. Come up with your own brand, like really know who you are. And for me, it's very important to do self-talk. So I created 2 mantras that help me find myself back when things start to get a little crazy. And for me, that's get hit, move forward, and right here, right now. So you're welcome to steal mine or create your
Nice.
own. But when things get a little crazy and hectic, just talking to yourself in first person, that'll help calm things down, remind you of who you are and how you're going to get to that yes.
G, expand a little bit on the brand number two.
So everybody has their little secret sauce you bring to the table. There's something that makes you different,
Yeah.
right? And as a leader, you should know what makes each of your people different, right? What makes them tick? Who is your go-to guy for this? What is going to be your go-to? So is it going to be for me in the military? They used to send me all their problem children. I was the go-to to deal with problem children and help get them to see their actual value in the picture, right? And so what is gonna be the thing that helps you make a difference and that really helps you create some sort of, I wanna say, impact within that area, right? So
Yeah.
and I think if people really focused on how they can influence within their sphere, that would help you find, what is the passion, the thing that makes you tick, that makes you different from everybody else sitting in that room.
Love
That's
it.
amazing.
Well, G, I want, first and foremost, thank you for your service. Thank you for your grit and your dedication to this nation, serving in so many platforms, so many different aspects. For the people that are listening, our audience, and if they want to get in touch with you, maybe explore a few other questions or just understand you better in your career path, how is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, if you hit me up on LinkedIn, I'm actually usually game there. And if there's any further information you can find from me there, yeah.
Perfect.
You can also hit up Google. So if you Googled my name, you'll find a little bit of my trajectory of life and things I've stated there I think could be useful.
Love it.
Amazing. Gee, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
This is an incredible journey that is nowhere near ending anytime soon. And I'm excited to see where things go from here for you. And 100% the offer's on the table that when you make some more progress with your prototypes, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you
100%.
guys so much for having me, and thank you for your service as well.
Yeah. Man, what an amazing episode. Gee, I'm incredibly humbled to have you on and be able to talk to you for the last hour. Learned so much from you, and grit. Holy cow. Talk about it
Oh my gosh.
from being pulled from your family to where you are today. No lack of having to dig down deep and forge your own path ahead of you. So the resilience in you is impressive. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Michael, what a great episode.
Fantastic episode. And with that, I think it's a wrap.
Yep. We'll see you.
Thank you.
See ya.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballinger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act Movement on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
That's the sound of the fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron and the quiet confidence of ultra-smooth handling. The elevated interior reminds you this is more than an EV. This is electric performance redefined.
Mamá, papá, mi cuerpo crece a un ritmo alarmante y la ropa que me compren ahora me quedará muy pequeña muy pronto. Pero su billetera no tiene que sufrir por la moda con los precios bajos de la vuelta a clases de Amazon. Amazon, gasta menos, sonríe más.
The American work ethic demands a hard-working power grid. For nearly 140 years, Siemens Energy has been driving America's energy expansion. Our expertise and broad portfolio supports a stronger energy system. Today, our equipment helps generate 25% of U.S. electricity. From coast to coast, Siemens Energy is building a more robust and reliable U.S. grid. Let's make tomorrow different today. Learn more at SiemensEnergy.com.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.